What happens when we want to edit an existing sculpture rather than start a new one? Let's investigate. When we went into play mode, we were taken out of sculpt mode. Now you're in assembly mode, so to edit your existing sculpture, you'll need to scope back into it. Scoping into a sculpture is exactly like scoping into a group. Hover over it with your primary imp. Hold the secondary triangle button, then press the primary X button. Scoping into a sculpture automatically puts you into sculpt mode. Now we're here, we can secondary triangle button, then press the primary X button. Scoping into a sculpture automatically puts you into sculpt mode. Now we're here, we can edit the shapes we've made. To grab and move shapes, first press the primary circle button to unequip the smear shape tool. Unequipping any tool automatically equips the move tool to your imp. Try grabbing and moving parts of the sculpture with your primary imp. To clone a part of the sculpture, hold the secondary triangle button, then grab whatever you want to clone with your primary T button. You can also resize the shapes you grab. Just hold the circle button on the secondary controller, then tilt or twist that controller to resize the shape. If you want to add to your sculpture, just open the Sculpt Tools menu using the secondary T button. Select a shape with your primary imp. This will equip the last sculpt tool you were using. Try sculpting with different shapes. Remember, you can undo and redo at any time. If you accidentally scope out of your sculpture, just hover over it with your primary imp. Then hold the secondary triangle button and press the primary X button to scope back in. You've probably noticed by now that all your sculptures are orangey brown, like clay. That's the default color, but you can sculpt with any color you like. If you're in assembly mode, scope back into your sculpture. Hold the secondary triangle button and press the primary X button. Open the Sculpt menu by holding the secondary T button. In the Sculpt menu, use your primary imp to open the Color section. Select a color group to reveal more shades. Now choose a shade. And as if by magic, the shape on your imp is now the color you chose. Any new shapes you make will be that color, but the old shapes are still brown. Luckily, we can also color shapes after we've created them, using the spray paint tool. Open the Sculpt menu and select the Tools icon with your primary imp. Then select the Spray Paint tool, which has a spray can icon. Now your imp will have an outline of the current shape on its tip. Intersect the shape with your sculpture and you'll see the spray paint color appears on it. Hold the primary T button to spray paint the shapes. Use different colors and shapes to completely change the look of your sculpture. There's one very important difference between sculpting with colour and using spray paint. Self-coloured sculpture edits will keep their colour when you move them, but if you move a spray-painted edit, the colour stays behind. So if you're going to spray paint, it's best to wait until you finish sculpting. You can also change the finish of your sculpture using the Finishes menu. Try out the Coat, Style and Effects tutorial if you want to know more about finishes. Take some time to practice using the smear shape and spray paint tools. Then, when you're ready, proceed to the next step. All these smeared shapes are creating one single sculpture, even if there's space between them. But you can also use the smear tool to remove from the sculpture, instead of adding to it. To do that, we need to make the tool subtractive. Scope into your sculpture if you haven't already, and make sure you have the smear shape tool active. You can equip it in the Sculpt Tools menu. In the Sculpt menu, find the Add or Subtract button. It's next to the Tools button, and the icon is a shape with a plus sign on it. Select this button with your primary your sculpture if you haven't already, and make sure you have the Smear Shape tool active. You can equip it in the Sculpt Tools menu. In the Sculpt menu, find the Add or Subtract button. It's next to the Tools button, and the icon is a shape with a plus sign on it. Select this button with your primary imp to make the shape you're using subtractive. You'll notice. Select this button with your primary imp to make the shape you're using subtractive. You'll notice that your imp turns into an outline. The shape on your imp, the move buttons, then start the next step once you're in position. Smearing shapes can be a messy business. Sometimes you just want to create neat sculptures. Luckily, there are ways to do that. Go to Sculpt Mode via the Modes menu to create a new sculpture. In Sculpt Mode, you're equipped with the Smear Shape tool by default. But this time, we're going to use the Stamp Shape tool instead. Its icon is a simple square. Select it with the primary X button. You can also quickly switch between the Stamp and Smear tools by pressing the primary triangle button. Stamping shapes is a bit like stamping objects from the Dreamiverse. With the Stamp Shape tool, you only stamp one shape at a time, no matter how long you hold the primary T button. We're going to practice sculpting an architectural structure over the second gap, which gives me an opportunity to show you a powerful new technique. Earlier, I showed you how to resize shapes in a uniform way using the secondary circle button. But you can also resize and reshape in an organic way using another gesture. Simply touch the glowing spheres of both controllers together while holding a shape, and you'll be able to organically resize and reshape it. We call this form. Manipulate the shape by carefully moving your imps in relation to each other. You'll see the shape changing in all 3 dimensions depending on where you hold the controllers. Make a shape that goes all the way across the gap. When you've got the shape the way you want it, press the T button on the secondary controller to equip the shape to your primary imp. You can now use this shape to sculpt with. Don't forget, you can undo by twisting your primary controller to the left and pressing its square button. Practice using form with different shapes to get a feel for this technique. Sculpt a simple bridge using Stamp Shape and form. This is just a practice run though, so don't spend too much time making it fancy. When you're ready, move on to the next step. If we want to make a super neat bridge, there are a couple of guides we can use. First, let's delete our practice sculpture. So if you're still in sculpt mode, go back to assembly mode. To leave a mode, hold the secondary triangle button, then press the primary circle button. Once you're in assembly mode, delete your sculpture by pressing the primary triangle button as you hover over it. Now go back into sculpt mode via the modes menu to start a new sculpture. The guides we're going to use are called Mirror and Grid Snap. Open the sculpt menu, then select the Guides button. Now select Mirror and then Grid Snap using your primary imp. They'll open to reveal some options. The plus and minus buttons next to the Grid Snap button set how fine or coarse the grid will be. The number indicates its current setting. You'll see a white dotted grid in the scene. The dots will be closer together when it's finer and further apart when it's coarser. Leave it set to 1 for now. You can experiment with it later. Now select the stamp tool and choose a color and a shape. The mirror guide will always center on the first shape you make. That's why we started a new sculpture. Use the move buttons to position your view so you can see the whole of the second gap. Then set your imp reach to one of the platforms. Now stamp your first shape in the middle of the gap to activate the mirror guide. You'll see the mirror plane appear. This can't be moved once you start sculpting. You'll notice that it's much easier to keep your shape straight and in line. That's because Grid Snap is active. It even helps you rotate precisely. With Grid Snap on, Objects rotate 45 degrees at a time. Sculpt your bridge from the mirror plane to the edge of the gap where it meets the platform. To sculpt the last bridge, we'll be using the mighty stamp tool again.